to the questions raised by that US strike in Nigeria, which have raised even more questions following a comprehensive investigation by the Washington Post. On Christmas night, President Trump announced that the US had conducted what he called numerous perfect strikes against Islamic State terrorists in Nigeria. However, reports emerged that 4 out of 16 Tomahawk missiles failed to explode, causing damage to residential areas and raising concerns about the effectiveness of the operation. The unexploded warheads were found in Jabo, Offa, and Zuguma, with residents describing the sounds of explosions and buildings shaking. The Nigerian government confirmed that the strikes targeted what it called terrorist enclaves in Sokoto State, but analysts have questioned the accuracy of the intelligence and the choice of targets. How much does that incident highlight the complexity of military operations and the challenges of combating terrorism in Nigeria? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the top security analyst and head of Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, Dr. Kabir Adamu. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
My pleasure, Charles. Good evening and Happy New Year to you.
Same to you. Let's start with your assessment of the effectiveness of the strike based on your company's intelligence gathering and the reports from respected U.S. news organizations like the Washington Post. Do you believe the U.S. airstrikes in Nigeria achieved their intended goals, given the reports of unexploded warheads and unclear targeting?
In simple terms, no. The fact that attacks have been ongoing after the military airstrikes, simply says that the intended results are yet to be achieved. And then if we pick the strikes themselves, the fact that till date, pictures haven't emerged of corpses of the killed Lakurawas. Neither have we seen pictures of destroyed, camps, equipment that they use in fighting, their gun trucks and all the other maybe guns and weapons. Tells me that perhaps the intended, outcome was never achieved. Like you indicated in your introduction, 4 of the 16 warheads that were deployed and that they never exploded. And we're talking of warheads that cost about $2 million US dollars per head. So roughly about $8 million US dollars was wasted. The other, there are about 12 that perhaps, landed on targets. Like I said, we've not seen any pictures.
And I'm just looking at the reliability of the ordnance, which is, of course, the Tomahawk missile. What might have caused the failure of 4 Tomahawk missiles to detonate? And what does that say about the reliability of that particular brand of U.S. military equipment?
The general consensus is that it couldn't and shouldn't have been the appropriate weaponry to use, given the nature of the threat element that we have in Nigeria. Asymmetric warfare, elements that are kind of infused within, law-abiding citizens. Perhaps ground troops and other forms of weaponry would have been more effective. It's very instructive to note that these missiles were launched from a destroyer on the Gulf of Guinea. Now, the most conservative distance that they covered would be about 1,000 kilometers. Now, because intelligence is not static, the possibility that perhaps even the intelligence that was provided changed from the time the bomb was launched to the time it hit its target. And then, of course, the launchers would have reason either to cause an undetonated landing of the particular missile. So there are several reasons. Technical faults could interfere, weather, wrong mapping, and several other components that have interfered to cause the unexploded ordnance.
Let me take you up on the issue of intelligence. I wonder how you assess the intelligence sharing between the U.S. and Nigerian governments, and whether it contributed, or how much it might have contributed to the mixed outcomes of the strike.
Well, the open information available indicates that the intelligence was shared by Nigeria to the U.S. I mean, it's a fact that the intelligence capability of the United States in this part of the world is really basic. For a lot of reasons, the different sources of intelligence, that capability is not as strong as it used to be. And so it relied on Nigerian intelligence. Now, the first question, Charles, that emerged is why the Lakurawa group? If you are ranking terrorist groups in Nigeria, the Lakurawas occupy, the lowest
echelons.
Exactly. So perhaps if it was ISWAP or Jamaat al-Ahl-Sunnah lil-Dawati wal-Jihad or Ansaru,
otherwise Boko Haram.
Yeah. Perhaps one would have said, okay, these are the more important and crucial terror groups. But the Lakurawa, they're somewhere way down.
So you don't believe that there's justification for the U.S. targeting?
Well, if that targeting had come after the more important targets. I mean, as you know, we do produce, intelligence reports, and when
Beacon Consulting,
by the company that I founded,
your company.
Exactly. Now we categorize the fatalities caused by each of these groups. Lakurawas are nowhere within the 10 top categories of threat elements.
So in that regard, because you are the expert here, I mean, in that regard, why do you think, because as you said, the intelligence was supplied by the Nigerians.
According to the reports by both the Nigerian and American.
And the Americans. So why do you think the Nigerians gave them that intelligence? Do you think they wanted to send them on a wild goose chase?
Not really. I think both of them knew what they were doing. In the case of the U.S., they've achieved a domestic objective. Of course, Trump came with the gun a-blazing statement, and he's under pressure, or at least the Congress.
From the fundamentalist Christians.
Exactly.
And people,
so
Congress people.
And then, it was instructive that attack occurred on the 25th of December, which was Christmas Day. It's also instructive that he had targeted Sokoto State, which is in essence, the symbol of the Islamic Caliphate in Nigeria.
Indeed.
So he may have achieved whatever objective that he may have set, symbolic, right. Exactly. As for the Nigerian state, they've succeeded in de-escalating the pressure that they were put under by the United States by allowing that attack to occur. Now, the reality, and this is now being strategic, the threat element remains, and anyone who doubts that should look at the number of attacks that have occurred from the 26th of December till today, the 13th of January. Several attacks have occurred. Several Nigerians have been killed within this period.
And that is all contained in your latest reports?
We reported up to December 31st.
Right. Well, give us a synopsis of that report.
Excellent.
Let's get a sense whilst we're there, because that's the way that we measure the success of these attacks and these pronouncements from the Americans. That's the report from Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, of which you are the head.
Thank you. So we published the report, like I said, marking the period from January 1st to December 31st, 2025. And what we did in that period, because it's the end of the year, we kind of analyzed.
And we're seeing parts of that report.
Exactly. So this is for December 2025, where we recorded a decline in fatalities. And what we saw in that period is for fatalities, we saw a 10.42% increase was recorded. What we saw in November was 451 in November, and then 498 in December 2025, which recorded a 10% increase.
And where was that concentrated?
Mainly in the northwest of the country, in Zamfara, in Katsina, mainly.
And so then more the actions of banditry.
Exactly.
Right.
And it takes us back to the statement, why the Lakurawas, when, for instance, bandits killed more people or abducted more people. For abductions, we recorded a 71.55% decrease in abductions when you compare between November and December 2025. We recorded 970 individuals in November 2025 and then 406 in December 2025. So clearly a decrease of about 71%. Now, if for the whole year, which is for me the most instructive part of the report, we saw an overall decrease. And interestingly, like I said, from January to December, it was, sorry, just a moment. Okay. Yeah. From January to December, we recorded 9,000 and there are about 9,000 fatalities for that period. And then for abductions, we recorded in 9,679 were recorded in 2024, while 8,523 were recorded in 2025, which was an 11.94% decrease.
Right.
For fatalities, we saw a decline as well. We recorded 11,692 in 2024, and then 10,504 in 2025, also a decrease of 10.16%. But Charles, the more interesting thing is the period of the decrease. From around May 2025, we started seeing a decrease from around 1,300 per month, and it ended the year with about 400. So clearly, there has been an increase in law enforcement capabilities within that period in Nigeria, especially within the rural area. And for me, this is what I think the Nigerian security apparatus should focus on. What led to that change from around May that has now led to this decrease? But then it's not yet uhuru. 10,000 plus people dying in a year is not something we should celebrate.
Indeed, it's not
However,
to be sniffed at.
Exactly. We need to look at where the successes were focused on. And like I said,
and what led to those
successes.
Right.
And two things for us. Like I said, law enforcement, improvement in law enforcement capabilities. As an example, the forest guards that was launched. As you know, this administration started that program, and several of them have already been deployed. The other one is an increase in intelligence capabilities. We saw specific targeting of threat actors, leading to the death of their commanders, leading to the destruction of the supply chains of these threat actors, especially of the terrorist groups and then the bandit groups. And it showed an improvement in intelligence. It also shows a synergy between the intelligence and then operational capabilities. And these are things that if we're going to see an improvement in 2026, I think we need to improve upon. It's also very instructive to mention the improved synergy between what the federal government is doing and what the state governments are also doing. We've seen engagements between the federal government, and I think that was a direct order coming from Mr. President, asking, for instance, the Office of the National Security Advisor to work more closely with state government. So we've seen that, but there are still pockets of variances. As an example, what is going on in Katsina State, which unfortunately I think is extremely deplorable, this idea to free 70 bandits as an example. Zamfara is saying they would not do the same thing. So those variances still occur, and we're hoping that in this year we would see that gap close.
We're almost out of time. We've got about 30 seconds. Give us your overall expert insight. What are the most significant takeaways from that American attack in Nigeria? And what would you recommend to policymakers seeking to address terrorism in Nigeria? In 30 seconds.
The most significant takeaway is the pressure that the Nigerian government is under. It's a no-win situation for the Nigerian government. Either way, the American pressure would sustain. So I think it's very important that as a country we take that into consideration. It's good we have de-escalated the pressure, but we must consider our interest first. With regards to the recommendations, the oxygen that the terrorists use to breathe and that allows them to operate, and I'll quickly mention them: funding, their ability to recruit, their capability to move around, especially the motorbikes that they move around on, their ability to, especially the ecospace in which they operate. We must suffocate these elements. The moment we do that, then they would have a natural death. If they're able to procure weapons like they're able to procure at the moment, they're able to attack military ammunition depots and steal weapons from that, then the insurgency and the terrorism will continue. The moment we block all of this oxygen that allows them to operate, then this will end. And I think this is where we should focus on. I must also mention the shadow economy through which they generate funding. And here we must look at illegal mining. We must look at kidnapping for ransom. The moment we're able to put kind of some form of surveillance within that shadow economy and prevent access to funding, then this would come to a natural end.
Dr. Kabir, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Kabir Adamu is a top security analyst and head of Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Charles.
That's it for this edition of Arise Primetime. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye and thank you for watching.